Yeah, so now I'm in my project folder, and let me go to CSS. Let me right click and open with code. So I am going to have my Visual Studio running, and from what we did earlier, there is a piece of code running. And okay, so today we are going to be looking at the other day, which was 2 days ago, we looked at the basic of CSS. We looked at CSS selectors. We looked at colors, I think so, and then a few other things. We looked at specificity and the other things. Today we shall move on to look at the next concept in CSS, and it's called the box model. So in my project folder, I'm creating another file, and I'm calling it box, right, underscore model dot html. Then I'm just going to I'm pressing shift and exclamation mark to bring my basic HTML boilerplate. And I believe you guys know what.
Hey, I can't hear anything. Oh,
Anybody else hearing me? If
yes, I can.
you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, please.
No, okay.
Yes, please.
Shambo, it may be a problem from your end. You can try increasing your volume.
Yes, please, sir.
So we're going to look at the box model, and I believe you guys know what this does. We looked at it in HTML, and I don't want to spend time coding it also. Let me just have this and change my title to box model, CSS box model. Then let me create a link, right? And then link it to a file called box.css. Then let me save. Now let me come into my file tree and create my CSS file, box.css. And let me close every other thing I have over there and close the file tree. Then as usual, we're going to be working with the live server so that whatever changes we make reflect on the website real time. Okay, so let me bring this from here, and I'm going to stick it to the very far right. So let's do this, and let me change this to. All right, so basically the concept of the box model is that in CSS or in web development, anything you see on the screen is in the form of a box. Are you getting it? And understanding how this box gets displayed will help you in setting your units and sizes and what have you. So we're going to be looking at them um, right now. And so in my HTML over here, I'm going to bring a heading one element, and as usual, this is a heading. All right. Then it's not showing here because my CSS file is open instead of what the box underscore model.html file. So let me just put that in there, and it's showing now. All right. So making my browser full screen, then let me right click and go to inspect elements. You can do that by Control Shift I think. And over here something is showing. If you can't see this particular box showing over here, I think you should click on your computer tab in your browser. When you right click and you go to inspect elements, you go toward computed, and you should have it showing there for you. So let me try to zoom in a little bit, and let's try to understand what the box model does. So as I said, it's everything which you're seeing on the screen. Even if you're having a circle, it's still displayed in the browser in the form of a box. All right. And there are sizes to it. Let me come here. And usually when you're writing CSS, we do something we call the CSS reset. Because as I mentioned earlier, there are some attributes, or there are some properties which are set by default by the browser. And when we want to set when we want to do the reset, we go with a margin. Let me give it a margin of zero, a padding of zero as well, and let me give it a box sizing of content box. Great. And I believe you all know what the star means. It's a wildcard selector, which means it's selecting every element. And so whatever styles we are applying over here, if that style can be applied by any element, that particular element is going to take up the properties which we have set over here. So let me save it, and you realize that my HTML, everything has now touched the borders over there. And when I right click, let me right click on my heading, and that is what we have over here, right? Fully, you have your hand up. Are you getting confused already?
No, please. Sir, I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
Does the universal selector affect everything in the body of
Well,
um,
all elements in HTML, they inherit parent properties. We looked at inheritance. However, there are some elements which do not inherit properties, like form elements typically. So when you look at form elements do not inherit the properties. All right. So I can come to a body. I get in it, and then for example, let me say border. Let me define a border over here and say none. All right. And then back in my HTML, let me just do this real quick. Let me bring a form. Then let me bring an input, a type of text, right? Then let me save this as well. All right, so the border in this case is affecting it, but in the wildcard selector, it's affecting everything. In case of the inheritance, all right, if we say we select a body element and then we apply properties to the body element. So let's say we go to body, and suppose we select a font family of Arial, giving it a sans serif fallback, right? Which means that you realize that the heading element is also taking up that it's inheriting the font property to set on the body. However, if I should set a font, sorry, in my form element, let me take this out. In my form element, let me bring a button. Let me change this over here so that we can see the effect I'm trying to show. Cambria. All right, so this is Cambria. Now in my form element, when I come here and I say button, now we realize that the font on the button is different from whatever we have set for the body, because the form elements, they don't inherit properties. So when I hover over the button, you see that it's showing Arial. That's the browser default for buttons. But what we have set on the body itself and what is going to be applied to all other elements which don't have a font family specified for them is going to be the Cambria font. So not all form elements inherit. But when you use a wildcard selector, it means you are selecting everything. So it's going to apply to it as if you have applied to that particular element itself. I believe it's your question answered. So we shall proceed and look at whatever we are going to be looking at today. And today I said we are looking at what? The box model. So since we are looking at the box model, let me take off the form and then right click on this to bring back the inspect elements. And then I'm moving to my computer tab for this to show. All right. And so when I look at the box element, it's giving me a particular size over here. Are you getting it? And that size is what? The width by the height of my element. All right. Then I can come back to my CSS and then I can give it, before that, let me just comment out the reset completed. And we are having some default margins showing over here, right? That's what been said by the browser. So let me just bring that back because what I wanted us to look at, it's not affecting it, so we can just bring it back. All right. So let me bring here and have my H1 and then give it a border of 1px solid red. Let me make it 2 so that it shows better. 2px solid red. Let me give it a padding of 2px, 2 pixels. All right, and save. Okay, so I haven't defined a width on it, right? So let me just define the width and make it a width of 250 pixels in this instance. All right, great. And you realize that the width I've given over here is 250 pixels. All right, I've defined a pattern, a padding of 2 pixels, which is also showing on both sides. Then I've also defined what a border with width of what 2 pixels, and it's also showing. What happens over here is that since our box sizing is set to what content box, if you apply a width to an element, the element takes up all the width you have applied. I get it. Let me just give it a height of 40, height of what 40 pixels, and then the element takes what all the 40 pixels. So in the box over here, the innermost one is what the content. Then we have the padding, the border, and then the margin. Right, and then the margin means the space around the object or how far it is away from it. So we can come back and then set a margin on it and give it a margin of, let's say, 5 pixels. And then you realize that the margin is showing here, and you realize that this has moved away. Let me make it a lot more. Let me make it 50, and you realize that it has moved farther away from it. So I think the impact is being seen at this moment. And so with the box sizing set to content box, the element is taking up what 250 pixels by 40. That is whatever we have defined for it for width and height. And then if we are applying a border, the width of the border is going to take what the space for other elements. Are you getting it? It's not going to take um, from that 240, we have 250 which we have assigned. It's going to take the space around it. So the element is there. Then it's now going to have what 2 pixels all around it, extra 2 pixels all around it. And then we've also what set a pattern of 2 pixels. So that 2 pixels is also going to be taken. Are you getting it? So this particular element which we have assigned over here, let me take off the margin for now. This particular element we have assigned over here is not taking only a width of what 250 pixels. It's taking a width of what 250 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is what 8. So it's taking a width of what 258 pixels. I hope you are getting it, because to the left is taking a padding of 2 pixels plus 250. So that's what 252. And then to the left again is taking a border of 2 pixels. That's 254. And it's taking the same on the right as well. So that's going to be what another 4, making 258. And so that's what we call what the border box. All right. Sorry, I said border, the content box. The next property which the box sizing can take is what we call the border box. Are you getting it? And when you use the border box, what happens is that if you define a width for the element and a height for the element, if you define a size for a border and padding, those units are going to be deducted from what the width instead of adding extra. All right. So you realize that. Let me bring this here a little bit. you realize that our H1 element has what? A width of 250 pixels. But when we look at the box model over here, or in the computed tab, you realize that it's now having what? 242 pixels. Are you getting it? Instead of 250. Now you realize that we've assigned what? A border of what? 2 pixels. And what? Let me just comment this out, and let me comment this out and this out. And I'm using a shorthand property which might get quite confusing. So let me just say border right of 2 pixels, right? Then border left of 2 pixels again. Then border top, sorry, of 2 pixels. Then we have border bottom of 2 pixels as well. All right, and it's gonna have the same impact we had earlier. Aside that, we are going to have what? A border type, a border style, sorry, a border style of solid. All right, and now our border begins to show. Then that's for the border. Then let's have a padding. So a padding top of 2 pixels again, and then a padding bottom of 2 pixels again, and then we have a padding left of 2 pixels, and then padding right. Not inherit is gonna be 2 pixels as well. All right, so that's also shown. Great. So since the box size, and if it's set to border box, it means that the border and then the padding are going to be deducted from the width set for the element. The margin doesn't affect um, the what is it? The box model. The margin doesn't affect it. What affects it is the border, the width of the content itself, the border, and then the padding. All right. So you realize that we have a border right of 2 pixels set over here, and it's showing. Then a border left of 2 pixels. Sorry, a border left of 2 and a border right of 2. Then a border top of 2, bottom of 2 as well. Are you getting? So when we pick the width, it's now showing as 242. Now we can now add what? These four values. Sorry, there are two values on the left. Are you getting it? And the right. So we have 2 over here and 2 over here, making it what? 4. Are you getting it for the border? And then we've also done the same thing for the padding, which is another 2 and 2. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8. When we add it to the 242, we have what? Our total width of the content, which is 250. Should we have this as content box? You realize that the element is taking its own 250 and the rest is taken from what? Outside. And it's a good practice, or the standard practice is to go for what? The border box. So that when you give a space to one element, when you're doing your calculations and you give space to one element, you know that okay, this element is going to take this amount of space. All right. Else you may begin to have 40 calculations. And let me show you a typical example. Let me comment this out, and then let me bring in a div, all right, and let me give it a class of parent, and then let me give it another div again, div dot child times 2. So, oh sorry, all right, so I have the div, I have two divs over here, three divs, one with a class of parents and then two children. All right. So let me come here and then remember our box sizing is set to content box, which means the padding and the margin are going to be taken from outside. So let me just give it a parent, and give it a width of 400. Sorry, width of 400 pixels and a height of what 400 pixels. All right, and we are not seeing anything yet because it's a div, and so if it has no content, we are not going to see. Let's give it a border of 1 px solid red. Still nothing is showing. Okay, now it's showing. Then let me give it a margin of 40 px auto, and it's centered over there. All right, so that's the parent element. All right, remember our box sizing is set to content. So for the each of the child elements, remember when you are starting with class, it's good. The style is going to apply to any element that has that particular class. So I'm going to give it a width of 200 pixels. All right, width of 200 pixels, and then a height of 200 as well. Then I'm going to give it a border of what 1 pixel solid blue. All right, and then as you can see, you know that 200 plus 200 is supposed to be what? Supposed to be 400. But if you can see very well, you realize that at the bottom, let me bring a few line breaks over here. My recording widget keeps disturbing me, so I can scroll this up a little more. You realize that the child is now, they are overlapping, all right, because the border which I have given to the child, it's supposed to be calculated from the 200 for it to fit within the space of 200 over here. But because we are using content box, it's going to be taken from outside, which is what's causing the children element to fall out of what the designated area. All right, so let me make this bigger and right click on this, inspect, go here. You realize that what it's having 200 by 200, that's the size of the content itself. No padding has been assigned yet, but it has a border of what 1 pixel, and it's taking extra. Are you getting it? If I should continue and apply a padding to this and give it another 1 pixel, you realize that the space is getting wider because it's now the size of the element is now expanding to what? To now take the padding from outside. Should we change this to border box? You realize that it fits perfectly into what? A parent container, because each of those sizes is what? 200 pixels, and the parent container is 400, so they fit perfectly into it. So that is it about the box sizing and how it works. What I did over here, which let me explain it. We have a few properties which I first of all did them short, and then I had to come and break them down for you to see. Yeah, Elvis, you have your hand up. What's your question?
Yes, when you inspected the page, I could see that the box sizing, the pixels reduced from 200 to 196. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. So with the when you are set to border box, what I'm saying is that when we are on border box, the border and then the padding are going to be what calculated from 250. Oh, sorry, this is not what we are doing. Each one, we've given this what 200. Are you getting it? So since we've given this 200, now we've given a border and then a padding. All right. So this border and then the padding are going to be taken from what? From the 200. Are you getting? It's like your mom gives you money to go and buy something from the market. All right. And now she says, take the transportation from the money she has given you. So that's what that's border box. But if she wants to give you an extra money to pay for transportation, then that's going to be what content box. So if she gives you 50 cities to go and buy something from the market, if she gives you, oh Junior, Dave, Dave, yeah, sorry guys. What I was trying to explain is if your mom gives you 50 cities to buy something from the market, right? And then she gives you an extra, let's say 10 cities to pay for your transportation in and out. Now that's going to be like content box, all right? So you're going to have your 50 cities intact. So you have the 200 over here and it's intact. And then the border and padding, which has been set, are now taking extra space around it. But if it's set to border box, then the 1 pixels for the padding all around it and the border all around will now be taken from what? From the 200. So it's like your mom doesn't give you money for transport. You have to remove the transport fee from the actual money she has given you. Um, is the question answered?
Yeah, it is. So I want one last thing. Like so, when you set the border box as content, it takes the 200, then adds
Extra.
the border to
Yeah,
the width.
it adds
Okay,
extra for border and padding.
okay. But with the the okay, I've understood it. Thank you.
All right. So, what other things which we should be I wanted us to look at. These I have used. I've used the border. All right. And let me just do a few examples so that you get to see the um, effects of the border very well. So suppose I let me take this up here. No. All right. So let me just copy this and give it to my parent element. All right. So you can see that I have given my border left. I haven't set a color. I haven't set a color here. Let me set a color. Say border color, and give it red. All right. I don't even understand the properties I'm setting here. I have right, left, top, and bottom. Okay, but I 1, 2, 3. Something is wrong over here. Let me clear everything and start again. All right. So I'm going to give it a border style, of solid, and then a border color of red, gray. Okay, and it's showing now. It's not supposed to show yet. And I give it a border bottom of 2 pixels. What I wanted to show, I'm getting confused here a little bit. All right, so we have. Let me bring this back here. Great. So we have our border. We have our border over here. We have the border style solid, right? Then we have a border right of what? Of 2 pixels. Then we have a border left of 2 pixels, a border right of 2 pixels, and a border bottom of 2 pixels. All right. So instead of spreading all of this out, what you can actually do is what use a shorthand property. All right. And so we can just say border is what we can use a shorthand property of border. Then we are first of all going to specify the size like 2 pixels, right? Then we specify the size with the solid and then the color and red, and it's going to show. So instead of using border bottom, border top, border left, and border right, you can simply use the shorthand and it's going to work for you. Then the next thing also applies to the padding, all right? And padding simply means space within the element. So if I should increase the padding of the H1, let me just comment everything out. So instead of padding top, padding bottom, padding left, and padding right, I can just say padding 10 pixels, all right? And you realize that this is wrapping because I have given it what a fixed width. Let me just take the width off. Let me take the height off. Right, so you realize that the space is now being increased around it. Let me just take this off so that we see, and this is the effect without the padding. And with the padding, what you can actually do is you can set four values like 10px, so that's going to be for the top. Then we have 10px for right, then 10px for bottom, and then another 10px for left. All right, but since they are all of the same value, what you can actually do is what repeat only one. Ananajuman, you have your hand raised.
Yes, please. Please, I just joined. Uh, there is something I don't understand.
Okay.
With the bus sizing, please, what does it mean? I'm very sorry to take you back.
All right. So I said the box sizing. It talks about how sizes are applied to elements. That's the width and height. All right. So when you set a border and a padding on an element, if the box sizing is set to border box, it means the size of the border and that of the element are going to be taken from the size which you have what applied. All right. But if it's on content box, then it means the size which you have given to element is going to be there. Then that of the padding and then that of the border will be taken from an extra space around the particular element. Is that clear?
Oh, okay, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. So another thing which we can do is have our padding changed to what to 10 pixels, which is still going to apply for it's going to apply to all the sizes of the particular element. So when we check our computer tab, you realize that the padding is now 10 pixels here, here, and here. Then another thing is you can use two properties. So suppose you want to give it a padding of what 10 pixels for the top and bottom, and then let's say left and right should be 20 pixels. Then you're going to specify two values over here, and you see it happening right. So you have a padding of 20 on the left and right, and then a padding of 10 for the top and bottom. Is everything clear at this end, or anybody confused on anything? All right, so if everything is clear at this end, we shall move on to the next thing. And another property which we can actually set on an element. Let me just clear this here for now and see. Let me give it a border. Let me use a shorthand. So give it a border of 1px solid red. Oh, I took off the margin. All right, so margin of 20px auto. And what the margin auto does is it's takes looks for what the space left. All right, let's say let me just take off this margin out. Right, so the space that is left over here, that free space that is left over here, it's going to take it and spread it evenly on both sides of the particular element. And it works for only the left and right. It doesn't work for top and bottom. All right. So when we have 20 pixels auto, it's going to give a margin of 20 pixels to the top, and then a margin left of whatever space that is left. It's going to distribute it evenly on left and right. So you can use it to horizontally center an element. All right, so I'm having this over here. Then I can pick my child element with whatever I have, and then I can do another thing for the border. And then it's another element we can, another styling we can apply on the border is the border radius. And you can give it any value, right? So I can give it a border radius of 5 pixels, and look at what's happening to our child. The border gets rounded, all right? So if you increase the value, the rounding is going to increase, all right? And you can use that to um, make a complete circle out of a box. So to make a complete circle out of a box, you just have to look at what the size of the height and then the width, and apply half of it for the border radius. In this instance is what, 100 pixels, right? And when you do that, we are going to have what, a complete circle. All right. And a better way to go about that is to use the percentages. All right. And when we looked at CSS units, we mentioned that we know that a percentage is always relative to something. And in this instance, when you set the percentage, it's going to be calculated from the width and the height. All right. So we are going to have 50%. Since the width is what, 200, and height is 200, and our border radius is going to be what, 200 across all sizes. Um, Anybody confused so far? Shaman, I saw you raise the hand earlier. Shamil. Okay, so from there, if no one is confused, yeah, I know. Enoch, you can speak.
Hello, sir. Sir, I want to ask the border box and the content box.
Yeah.
Um, in which when you are developing a website for somebody, which one should you use for maybe each case for the border box? If you are building something that will be dynamic or static, or maybe for the content box, like the use cases for
Okay,
both.
so
Are,
the use case is always going to be border box, because you can use a content box and it will work well. But when you do that, it means you have to make extra calculations. Are you getting it? Did you join from the very beginning?
yes, please.
All right, so you realize that I gave an example, all right? When I set everything to content box, you realize that my circles are leaving their parent. Are you getting it? Even though the parent is set to 400, and then these ones are 200. And so they are supposed to fit perfectly. But because it's content box, the padding and then the border, which is what, 2 pixels on each side, is now calculated outside. And since this is fitting exactly 400, this is going to be what, 402. Are you getting it? And the same way, if we should have this to what, 200, you're going to see that, oh, sorry, not the height, the width, you realize that it's falling out of this side as well. And so one pixel extra here, 1 pixel extra here, and then 1 pixel extra for this, and another pixel extra for this. So you realize that this side it's a little wider. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you go with content box, it means you're going to be having problems like this when you do the calculation. You assume that, okay, if this is 200 and I set 100, it should fit. But if you use content box, it's going to what? Overflow, and you would have problems. So you use border box, the margin, and then it doesn't affect margin. The padding and the border that you set are going to be calculated from the parent element. And so you still have 200, a space of 200 pixels taken up. If you're totally
Okay,
okay,
sir.
yeah, you're totally okay. Then we'll move on to the very next concept which we'll be looking at in CSS, and that is typography. All right, and so let me just create another typography.html, and let me just do same. All right, so now I come to work with typography, and right, CSS typography basically it's about typefaces and our properties that affect fonts, which we're going to be using on our web pages. All right, and just like most all the other properties have their default styles or default properties, which is set by the browser. If we have a H1 heading over here, right, and this is not showing because uh, something is definitely wrong. Let me refresh it. Okay, so everything is working fine now. And you realize that by default, a font type, or some designers would like to call it a typeface, is a default font type is set, which we haven't specified. And in this instance, is what? It's Times New Roman. It has a weight of 700, a font style of normal, a weight, a size of what? 32 pixels. And in when we're working in CSS, what we can do is what we can set our own font size. Are you getting it? And what we usually would like to do, let me link to the file, the CSS file. All right. What we can do is what set the font family property. So first of all, we're going to be looking at what the font family property. All right. And then after I have my heading, let me bring a paragraph and some dummy text in it. Then I think we're good to go for now. Right. So over here, I can actually use the wildcard selector, all right, and select a font family, and let me make it Korea new, right? And then it's going to affect all the elements, all right. But what we mostly would want to do is apply that onto the body, all right. So we can now set the font family, and we can make it what Korea new, and it's still affecting any text element which is within the body. These can also be overwritten by specifying the exact font type on an element. So when we come on to the H1 element and we say font family, and then we choose Girl Sans over here, then you realize that it's now taking a different font family because we have what specified it over here, and it's going to override the pairing. So that is one thing. So when you want to set a particular font, what you do is what you use a font family property, and then you assign the font name, and we usually give it what we call a fallback. All right. So the font name over here is the name of the font which we are going to choose. It is assumed that this font, font is existing on the user's computer. All right. So there may be a particular font which you like, which you're going to be using on your website, right? But not all users are going to be having that font. Therefore, we provide what a fallback, all right? So we can give a font like what Poppins, all right? And I've saved Poppins over here, but you realize that the font didn't change, and it's because I didn't have Poppins on what on my computer, all right? And so now it's going to, instead of it defaulting to the Times New Roman, which I don't like, I'm going to specify what a similar font, or a font, a generic font family. So what that is telling the computer is look for what Poppins, all right? And if you can't find Poppins, then look for any sans serif font on the user's computer and display, all right? And let me just go on to Google Fonts, and let me show you. We're going to be looking at how to import fonts, right? So On the Google Fonts page, let me look for a font called Poppins, which is what I was trying to use. All right, so this is the font called Poppins. All right, then this is how it is. And I don't have this font on my computer, right? But that's what I wanted to use. And so after I've specified it over here, a count found, and then I've given what a fallback of sans serif. So now the computer looks for any sans serif font, and in this time it's picking a font called Arial, right? So when I click over here, it says what sans serif. I get, and this font name is actually what Arial, and I think it's an Arial font, right? So if you specify Arial, this the same font that is going to come. The same way I can give it what a fallback of what of cursive, right? And then it's going to pick this particular font. When you check here, it's going to show what cursive, right? But the actual name of this font is what Comic Sans. And so any font that falls in that particular family, which is existing on the user's computer, the website is going to default to that font. And the reason for that is you would want to display a font that is similar to what you have designed the website with, right? Suppose you used Poppins to design a website, this nice font, and now this font doesn't exist. You don't want it to go and look different. It should look at least similar. So you use a fallback that is similar. Now, someone may want to ask, what is sans serif, right? So when we look at fonts, we have something called what serif fonts, and then we also have what sans serif fonts. And let's look at them over here, right? So let me look at this particular image and see. All right, so this gives us the difference, that clear difference. All right, so when you look here, you see that this is what a serif font and this is a sans serif font. And the simplest way you can use to identify serif from sans serif is that the serif fonts have what extensions at what the ends. So when you look at a font like Cambria, when you look at font like Meriwether, you look at a font like Book Antiqua, Bookman Style, and Times New Roman, which is widely used, you realize that they are like this, right? And so should I say that I want my fallback font to be serif? Let me go back to the page, and you realize that it's picking a serif font, which is actually Times New Roman. All right. So that is the meaning of what a fallback, and you can actually specify lots of fonts which you want. I get it. And then somebody is asking a question here. He said, "Can you use script font to in developing a website?" I don't get what you mean by a script font. Folly, if you can unmute yourself and explain that so that we can move on.
Yeah, hello, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah, a script form like it's like a handwriting form. You see, when you want to sign that thing that you do is a script. It's like you're writing something.
scribble,
So there's a type of font called like script font.
the
There is a
scribble.
yeah
Yeah, so
script font
script
script
font.
font.
Yeah, so what that's going to be, it's they have what a generic family, right? Like fonts that look like it. Are you getting it?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
That look like it, all right? And the generic family for I believe what you're talking about should be cursive. Let it load, all right? So something like this, you are going to default it to what? To cursive. Are you getting it? You are going to default to cursive. So when we look at, let me just search for cursive, cursive font family, and you see the cursive fonts. All right, there are a whole lot of they are different. Like it's like a bigger family for them. All right, and so anytime you are using a font like this, you default it to what a cursive, so that if the computer can't find it, I like this example over here. If the computer can't find it, it's going to pick what a font which is related to it. So this is the cursive. This the Comic Sans also falls within the cursive family. Then we have the sans serif. Then we have the serif. We have fantasy and we have what the monospace. So the Korean new, and then all the other ones, those ones that look much like an olden day typewriter font, those are they fall within what the monospace font family. It's your question answer. You can basically you can use any font to build your website depending on one thing. If that is the look and feel you want to give to your website, right? Then you also have to make sure that your website is accessible, it's easy for people to read the text which you are going to be putting on your website. And so you should take key note about that as well. All right. So another next thing we're going to be looking at is how do you get fonts to use, right? Because we have seen a lot of websites with beautiful fonts, and we don't even have those fonts on our computers, right? But they are still going to be displayed very well. Now we have something we call what content delivery network, and the content delivery network or CDN, they are used to host resources, all right, that we can always access them online. Great. And one of them is the Google Fonts platform. So you can actually pick a font from here, link it in your CSS or your HTML file, and then it's going to work. So as you have all seen, let me default this back to what sans serif because that's supposed to be the family, all right? You realize that the Poppins font is not showing because this font that is showing here is not Poppins. All right, it's not showing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now link this. All right, so I'm going to get font, and then now it's picked over here, right? So let me go to get embed code. Google have updated their website recently. All right. So what we are going to do is what? Let me choose the import type. Are you getting it? And then let me just copy this particular line. Now what you can do is you can whatever they have over here. When you copy it, it means you're coming to do what in an on-page styling. Are you getting it? Something is wrong. Let me see if I can figure that out. Right. So this is how it's supposed to be. And we are going to do what an in on page styling, internal styling, right? But that's not what we want to do. So let's take off the style element from it. Then let's copy this. Then take this into what our CSS file. Are you getting it? And anytime you are doing import, so you can import another style sheet into your style sheet. That's one thing you should know. You can also import fonts, right? So now I'm importing this font, and you do it by what? You bring the @ sign, import the URL, then you specify the link to the file. Are you getting it? Now, when I come back to my web page, where is my web page? This and this, and you realize that my text have changed. I don't know if you noticed. Let me just comment this. You realize that it's showing differently. But now that I am importing the font, the browser now has access to what, or the website now has access to this particular font, and it can now what be displayed on my webpage. So I can now go ahead and then use that particular font everywhere I want. Adnan, your hand is up. Anajman,
Hello, sir.
yeah, your hand is up.
Please, I wanted to ask this question. Since you said you can import the font from the Google font direct,
Yeah.
instead of importing and then specifying it yourself in the CSS, which one is, which one is good?
Okay, so it's they are not rivals. I get it. It's not that you are going to choose one over the other. Realize that I've imported the font, right? If I don't assign it, it's not going to work. You realize what's happening over here. So the primary thing is to what? To assign the font. But the font is not going to be seen on the if it's not existing on the user's computer unless you import it. Are you getting it? So it means you have to do the two. You first of all have to import the font, and then you have to what? Specify it. And what you're going to do in everything, you have to import the font. All right. If you don't import the font, then it means you are going to load the font into what? Your document directory. Then you link to it so that the CSS file knows that okay, this font that is being specified, I can go grab it from here. Then you can now use it. Else, you're going to have challenges displaying fonts. So the standard way of getting fonts is to use what? Use a CDN, like a font, Google font. And there are a whole lot of them. We have another one like the font. Also, I think the font also has a CDN. Not quite sure if they have a CDN, but there are a whole lot of other font platforms. And I usually go with Google Fonts. So you can also try that. I'll include a link of,
And then my other question is that, let's say I want to use the font. Let's say what you're having here, Poppins.
yeah,
I have installed the font on my laptop.
yeah.
If you not import it from Google and then specify that the font family I want Poppins, will it work?
If you don't import it and you specify, it will work. Are you getting it? For example, I have the Roboto font stored on my computer, right? I've installed Roboto font. So let me change this to Roboto,
Oh, okay.
right? And Roboto is working. Are you getting it? Roboto is working over
Exactly.
here, right? But you should know that you are not building a website to use it on your own computer. Suppose this website is hosted online and somebody access it. If the person doesn't have that font, it's still not going to display for the person.
Uh,
Are you getting? So it
oh,
means you have
okay.
to link to
Yes,
it
sir.
from what? A remote source so that it can be accessed from everywhere.
Oh,
For
okay.
the person to be able to
Okay.
access your website, the person needs an internet connection. And so long as the person has internet connection, they can now access the CDN to import the particular form, right? So let's move on to look at
Okay.
some other properties under typography. Are you getting it? And we can do another thing which is called what? The font size. All right. And when we look at the font size, we can just set it to what? 12 pixels, and it's going to look very small. All right. We can also do another thing like 2 rem, and it's going to increase. All right. Now I want to ask a question. I've set the font size to 2 rem. All right. Why is this one looking bigger than this? Yeah,
So it's simply because the RAM is taking the root element of the page, which
but
is
both of
16
the both of them are
30.
taking the root element. If I should check this is showing me 32 pixels and this is showing me 64 pixels. And the reason is simple. Let's not spend much time on that. The reason is that the heading element already has what? A font size of what? 2 rem. I getting it? A font size of 2 rem by default on it, and 2 rem becomes what? 32 pixels. I getting it?
Yeah,
It's 32. So when I make it 2 rem again, it's now going to be what? 32 times what? 2.
two.
I get it. It already has 2 rem. So it's going to be like what? Fonts H1. What's going to be happening is what? H1 times, what do we call it? So font size 2 rem is the same thing that is happening. Are you getting it? And because I specified 2 rem over here, it's now going to the root. But if I make it 2 em, it's now coming back to what? So it's going to pick what? 2 of its what? Parent element. So the 2 rem over here becomes what? 16 times 2. And then this picks that 16 times 2, which is 32, and multiplies it by 2 again. If you're getting confused, kindly go back to the video on CSS units and sizes, and I believe you'll get the understanding there a lot better. Now, I want us to look at other properties which we can set on what? The font, and we can go what? For the font size, or we can specify a font size, all right? And you can switch between units. You can use the rem, you can use the em, you can use the pixels, you can also use percentages, right? And it's still going to work. Are you getting it? But it's not going to give you the desired result because it's now going to be what? Dependent on the size of the body, all right? You can also use what? The view height units. You can also use what? The viewport width unit. And they are not going to give you the desired results because the user, you realize that it's big, it's giving us what? A very good size over here, but it's not going to be very good for users that are using smaller screens. So we'll be looking, and when we are building projects, we'll look at the more realistic ways to apply dynamic font sizes. For now, let's stick with the absolute font sizes, and so let's go with let's say font size of 2 rem for now. I think that's okay. Let me change this back to Poppins. And then one thing you have realized is that the font name over here it's in what? It's in quotes, right? And it's not required. However, if you are using a font family which has separate names, I get it. For example, let me get back onto the Google CDN and let me remove this. Let me look for fonts and let me remove this. Right, so this font here is what? Open Sans. I get it. And suppose let me just grab this. Let me go to import and grab this here simple. Back here, let me comment this, and you can import multiple fonts. I can have that working, all right, and then I can paste this here as well. And, so what's the name of the font? It's what? Open Sans, all right. And so when you do that, what Google suggests, Google gives you what? A way to actually add the font in what? In your CSS. Are you getting it? They've done a little update from the last time I used this particular page, so I'll try to figure it out. But whatever is here, you can just copy this code, and you're not going to use all of them. We'll clear them, all right? We'll clear them because it's only one property we want, and that's what the font family property. All right, so let me comment this out. And you realize that the font name is what? Open Sans, right? And let me see if it's having an effect on my body. It is, right? The Open Sans is having an effect on my body. But let's see if we remove the quotes, not this, realize that it's showing an error. Are you getting it? And so when the font name is open, if there is space between the font name, you would want to put them in what? In your quotations for everything to work well. So that's one thing about it. Let me just take this out and take this out, uncomment this, and we're good to go. Then another property which you can define as well is what? The font style, right? And when it comes to the font style, we can set values like italics, and it's going to affect everything. Let me not apply that to my body. Let me apply that to the paragraph, right? And so we have font size italic, which looks pretty nice. We can have another style of what? Oblique, which is also more like what I the italic. We can also have another font style of when you do this, you're going to have a whole lot of them. So we have the initial, the inherit, and then on still. So on set, let's try the initial, and it's we wouldn't notice any changes with the initial. And then when you choose inherit, what that does is it inherits the font style of the parent element. All right. So when we come to the body and we say font style of italic, you realize that this is going to get affected by it. So that is for the font style. Another property which we can also assign is the font weight. All right, is the font weight. So we can just come onto the P and say font weight to VS Code is suggesting a list of values which we can put over there. So we can have 100, which is what? Very thin and it can almost not be able to read. All right. Then we have what? 900, which is what? The thickest form. All right. So the span between 100, 200, you can have 300, which is slightly thinner but still readable. Then you can have 400, which in most cases is the default. Yeah, so the default is 400. All right, so we have sorry for that. We have the default font size of 400. Then we can have it 500 depending on how thick you want your element to be. All right. Then another property which we can also proceed and set on the font is the font. Okay, the font weight which we just looked at it. Then we can also do something like what, text decoration. All right, and then we can say text decoration. Guys, can you give me a moment? How many sheets? Two. Two sheets. Okay, so sorry for that. So when it comes to text decoration, we have dashed, all right, and not having anything over there, but we can have a text decoration of what, underline, which is going to give an underlining. It's going to underline our text for us. When we were doing HTML, we realized that you can wrap an element in what, the within the U element, and then the U tag, and then it's going to be underlined for you. So if we take this off, you realize that that particular word has what, the underline. However, you can still do the underlining right in CSS. So that's how to go about it. So we can have another text decoration of what, overline, which is the opposite of underline, right? Then we can also have other properties like strike line through, sorry. You can also have line through, which it's also showing over there. Then another property which is going to affect the font is the text transform, right? And then we can have capitalize. And let me just take this off for now. When you have capitalize, it's going to make the first letter of each word capital, right? Then we can also make it a uppercase, text transform to uppercase, which is going to transform all the letters to uppercase. Same way we have lowercase, it's going to transform all the text to lowercase. All right. A moment, please. Yeah, right. Yeah. No, are they do some meeting that why? Are they on meeting that why? Like he come out. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sorry guys. Today I'm having a lot of interruptions and I do apologize for that. I promise it's not gonna happen again. I'll try as much as possible to take care of that. And so we can have our text transform to lowercase as well. Then there are a lot more other properties which we can apply. We have other properties which we can apply, and we can also have what, the line height. All right, so we can have a line height of 2 pixels, and look at, it's going to give just a space of 2 pixels from what, between each line. So you want to use, and it also takes what, direct numbers, right? So we can have a line height of 2, which this is how it's going to look. We can have 1.5, which I think is the default. Yeah, so a line height of 1.5 is a default. If you want something a little bit, you may want to make it 2, depending on the font and it coming together with all the other elements on your web page. Then another property which we can also look at. So for the line height, you can use all the units. Are you getting it? And then you can also use just numbers. So you can say um, 2 viewport heights, and it's going to have an effect on it. You can say 2%. All right, and that's going to be 2% of what, the font size. All right, and since we haven't specified the font size for the okay, so the font size for the paragraph is now what, 2 rem, which is going to be 32 pixels. All right, and that's going to be 2% of 32 pixels, and you can do the math. So that's a line height of 0.64, which is not something you'd want to have. All right, so let me leave it on 2 for now, and then the other property which we can also do is what, the letter spacing. All right, so we can have a letter spacing of 1.5. Sorry, and I think that should be the default. Let me try pixels and right. Okay, so for the letter spacing, we have to use the units. All right, so we have a letter spacing of 1 pixel, which takes it a little bit. I think 0.5 should be the default. Not quite sure. And then you can just change it to 0, and it's not gonna have an effect. Let's say 5 pixels, and it's going to spread the letters. The same way we can also apply what sorry, word spacing, all right? And word spacing, it's also now going to increase the spaces between each word, right? So let me apply a bigger number like 50, and we're going to be having something like this for the words. If we should change this to, let's say, 10 pixels, then you realize that the letters are going to be spaced even wider. And that's it for the fonts. The properties which we can set on fonts. There are a whole lot of them, but we barely used all of them. And so as we get to build projects, we'll come across most of them. Anybody having any questions so far? All right, so let's move on to one last thing we'll do before we close for today, and then that's going to be what styling links. All right, and let me just close this too, and come here and let me just make it links.css, and then let me have my links.html. All right, so the usual ritual. Then we can have styling links. All right, and then first of all, I'm going to bring a heading. I like doing that. Then we say styling links. Okay, then I'm going to bring a paragraph. All right, then I'm going to bring a dummy text and something like that. All right, so we now have it showing. Then I'm going to inside the paragraph, I'm going to add what a few links. All right, so when I'm talking about link over here, it's not linking to a CSS file. Of course, let me link to my CSS file so that whatever we do will work. Links.css, but here I'm going to apply an anchor link to this, right? And let me just leave the href for now, and then put this over here, right? So let me come back into my file and then say page1.html, and then do so for page2.html. Then I'm gonna do the same thing for page3.html, and I think that's okay for now, right? And I'm having h1 code word page one. Sorry, this is page two. Close that, and I'm gonna paste this page one. Close that, and I think I give something back for page three. Yeah, so this should be for page three. All right, and we're not going to be doing anything in these pages. We just want to link back to them. What did I do? Links.html. All right, so we are here. So the first one, we're going to link to what? Page1.html. All right, then this is here. Let me link this to, let me make this page two. Then let me say page1.html. Then say page one. I think I have a problem over here, right? So my dot's supposed to be one. All right, then let me add another paragraph, right? Then dummy text again, and let me link this to page. Sorry, an anchor tag, page three. Then bring this text over here. All right, great. So as you can, let me zoom my page out a little bit, all right? And when you have an anchor link, you'll notice that it also has what a default style, all right? So it has a color of blue. And when we are going to style links, just like any element, you can what select the element which you are going to style, which is what the anchor element A. Another thing which you can also do is what give it a class, then you select it by the class. For now, let's focus on selecting the element itself, all right? And then it has a color of what blue, all right? And that is the default. So when I style it, you're not going to see any changes. However, you may have noticed that what something occurred over here, and we're going to look at it, all right? So our focus basically is on what styling of links, all right? And then you realize that the default style of link is what it's blue and it's underlined. When I take this off, you realize that this link it looks what different. All right, so let me go back, and then when I click on page 2 as well, let me go back, and you realize that page 2 also looks different. Page 2 becomes now begins to look like what this particular link. Are you getting it? And so in CSS, when a link is visited, it has what a different color as well. All right, so what we can actually do is what, say we are styling a link, we can give it what a color of what, let's give it a color of green. Let me give it this green over here, right? So all our links are becoming green. And when I specify this, it overrides all the other states. You notice that now these two links have already been visited, but then they are not changed because we this color now what overrides them. So what we can actually do is what give bring something we call a pseudo class, right? And pseudo class basically talks about a state of something. We'll be looking at pseudo classes and pseudo elements later on. So let me just run through this really quick. And then we can have what visited, right? The visited pseudo class, which works on an anchor link, all right? And then what that does is that if a link has already been visited, then apply this style to it, right? So we can give it a color of what red. I get it. So these two links that have already been visited now have what a color of what red. So that's one style which you can apply to. That's one way to style links. Another thing you can do is another pseudo class which we can look at is what the hover state, right? The hover state, and the hover state means what you have the mouse hovering over it. Are you getting it? And so we can also say color is let's make it a color of blue violet, right? So when I hover over this, you realize that what it changes to what the color we've assigned for the hover state, the blue violet, and this what goes. All right. Then there is also one other class which I would like us to look at, which is what active state, right? The active pseudo class. And then let's start that. Let's give it a color of yellow, right? Yeah, for yellow for now, right? And the active class comes to play when you click and hold, right? So you realize that when I click and hold, I'm still pressing my mouse button. You realize that the color changes to yellow. So that is the active class, all right? And so let me drag so that I don't click on it. And I click here, this is now active. And so the color changes to what? To yellow. If we don't specify this, it's now going to take what the default link color, all right? So when it's hovered, it stays the violet blue, and that's it. If we don't specify this as well, then it's going for what the green. Are you getting it? And that's going to be it. Let me not forget there is one last class, which is what the focus pseudo class, and let me give that a color of brown. I don't know if that's going to give any difference between that and the red, but I hope we see the difference, right? And so, in an event where the person is not using a mouse but they're using the tab, right? So when I press the tab, you realize that this now becomes what focused, right? So when I press the tab key, it's going to jump between what the elements on the page which can be selected. So when I jump next, you realize that now page 2 is now focused and the color is showing what blue. Then that happens. So when somebody happens to be using the tab key, this is going to be the effect they are going to get. right? And of course, color is not the only thing you can do about what links. All right, so let's apply a few more styles to our links. You can also do what apply the text decoration of none, and it's going to remove all the underlinings from what from our links. I get it. Let me go back to the typography CSS. Sorry, typography CSS, and let me. Oh, sorry. Let me bring in that particular font for now. Let's work with it. And then let me not assign, let me just take this out. All right, so I'm not currently, you can see that I'm not assigning any fonts to the, I've what imported the font, but I have not assigned it to any elements, so the page is still using the default. Right now I can just select my anchor links and give them what the font family of what poppins, right? So poppins, and let me just wrap that in quotes, just like Google recommends for us. And then also, anytime you declare a font, don't forget to give what a callback. And this is the sans serif font, and so let me give it a callback. All right, and so you realize that everything else stays Times New Roman, but the link elements are now what are now using the Poppins font, and so you can also change the font style. You can change what the font weight for them and make it what bold. All right, and it's going to happen to them. All right, the text declaration, I think it was underlined by default, which we took it off. You can apply a whole lot of stylings to it. Right, then another thing you can do is that what when the link is hovered, then the underline should come. So from back here now you can say what text declaration, sorry, text decoration is now going to be what underline. So whenever I hover over a link, then the underline is what is going to show, and you can use it to do a whole lot of what different things. All right, and you can also say that when the link is visited, it should show red. So all the styles which we are applying over here, you can apply them to any of the classes based on how you want it. All right, and it's going to show, so it's going to be based on how you want it to be styled, the logic you want to have behind everything, and then you go with it, right? And a better way to actually do this may be to give them colors that are what similar. All right, so since our font color is green in this instance, now let me change this. Let me apply the font family to the body so that we have everything looking the same for us. What am I doing? Right, so when I have my body, then I can say font family. And another thing, what some people also like to do is what they can bring the HTML rather, and it's still going to work. Basically, it's the issue of inheritance, right? So when you apply it on the body, it means anything inside the body is going to take that particular font. If you apply it on the HTML, it means anything inside the HTML is going to take that font, and the body is inside the HTML. So now the body will now pick from what the HTML, then the other elements will now pick from what the body. And so this also works. Let me just change it back to body, and then let's just give this what another shade of green, something that will make it similar. Then the hover state, right? Let me make something like this, right? And I don't know if you can see the difference, but I think the hover state is a little darker. Let's make it a little bit lighter. Still trying to see difference, all right? And this is happening, all right? And so you wouldn't want to give a different link. Sorry, the visitor. I was working on visited rather. Let me change this and give it to visited. And sorry, and give it to hover. The reason you wouldn't want to style a visited class is that you wouldn't want the user to feel like, okay, I've visited this link already, so let me not go there, right? It's usually not done. But in an instance where that's an effect you want to achieve, then you can apply it. All right. Then another thing we can also do is, so you realize that, okay, let me try and do this, and that is happening. I get it. And so we want when it's active. All right, so we have the focus state over there, which is taken from the active class. So we can now take the focus state off or if that is what we want to keep, we can have that over there. And you've realized that the focus is now overriding what the active state, right? Let me look at this and see if the cascade matters, and you realize that the arrangement matters over here because the focus came first. Now the active is what taking precedence, right? And when I do this, now the active is what? Um, sorry, the focus is working, and then the active is also working. And so you should know how to arrange your classes so that all the effects you want to achieve comes. So first of all, you will want to style the um, element in its raw state, then the hover, then the focus, and then what? The active. So basically that's it over here for now. Another thing which you can do is maybe you can for your web page to look very okay. Another thing which you can do is maybe for the color you can apply the same color, but then give it what an opacity. So opacity is also another attribute which we can, another property which we can assign, and the value ranges from what 0 to 1. I get, and so when you give it 0, it's what totally transparent. So when I hover over the element, you realize that it gets what missing, it becomes totally transparent. When I make opacity 0.5 and I hover over it, you realize that it becomes a little bit lighter. That is 50% transparent. And so yeah, I can change it to something like 0.8, which seems what it looks like the same color, just a little bit lighter, which it's not bad. All right, I think yeah, this is not bad. And that's another thing you can do. When we were looking at CSS colors, another thing we looked at RGB, and we looked at what RGBA, and we mentioned that the A is what the alpha channel which controls the transparency, and so that is actually something which you can do as well. So you can just bring A over here, and then bring what 1, sorry, a comma and 1, which is 0% transparent. It's fully opaque. It's going to be showing over there. Then I can change to 0.5, all right? And we're going to have the same effect. This time we are not using the opacity, but we are doing what? We are using the alpha channel for the color code, right? And one thing you should notice about the opacity is it can affect other elements. So you should be careful when using the opacity. For example, when we come onto the body and we do this, sorry, you realize that everything on the body becomes a little bit faint. Let me make it zero point 0.2 so that you can see the effect, right? And so when you apply opacity, you should be careful you are applying it on an element that doesn't have children, else they are going to inherit that particular opacity as well, unless it is your intention for the children to also inherit that particular attribute. So let me pick this from here and then put it here and still have it commented out. So far, anybody having any question, anybody confused? Great. Another thing which you can also do about links is you can also, you notice that by default, when I put my mouse over the link, it changes to what? The pointer or the finger, right? You can also define another property which is the cursor. By default is the pointer, and you can change it to what? Arrow. Yeah, all right. So we have e-resize, and when you override, this is what it's going to show. We also have other properties like let's say copy, and when you let me say when you hover over it, this is what is going to show as if you're dragging an element. So there are a whole lot of them to use. You can change it to grab, right? And then when you hover over it, it looks like you're grabbing something. There is also grabbing, which looks like it means item has been held, right? So there are a whole lot of them, a whole lot of them. You can experiment over them. But in a real world project, you want to make sure that you are applying properties that actually do make sense. For now, as a beginner, as a learner, you should experiment with all the properties. And one of the reasons why I did mention earlier that Visual Studio Code is a very good tool is it helps you to explore more, right? You realize that after you've defined the property and you bring what the colon, it gives you a list of values which you can use, all right? So you can just try some of them and see what they are capable of doing. Then, when you are having a project, you can try and introduce some of them. That is, if it fits, fine, and that's it. Anybody having any question? Anybody having anything which they don't understand that they have to take care of? Any question so far? All right, then. So, if there are no questions, if there are no problems, then I would like us to bring today's session to one end. It's been an hour and a half, and I did mention that we'll be spending 2 hours, but not always are we going to be taking all of the 2 hours. Sometimes we leave some behind. Sometimes we spend more than that. So, I did. Let me just quit my recording for now.